I'm William Bryant for everyone tuning in. And we have another amazing Black inspirational, so inspirational spotlight with Jemele Hill. Thank you so
Oh,
much for
thank you for
joining
having
us.
me. I appreciate it.
So, how is it quarantining right now? How's the quarantine treating you?
It's been you make the best of it. You know how it is. I think at this time because whatever little complaints that I can tell you about right now, considering where what some people are really really dealing with,
Yeah.
it's hard for me to even muster up some level of like, oh, this is, this sucks or that's not whatever. All that stuff just kind of goes out the window during this kind of time. So I've been really appreciative of the resources I have, of being somebody who is still working very consistently, if not in that category of quite a bit. But, on a personal level, um, I can't say that it would be the things that I miss are really kind of small things. Like I do miss being able to go to yoga. I do miss that.
I
Not
miss
gonna lie.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I miss that. Right now my nails look like a war crime. So I do miss that. Miss that as well. And there's like little amenities that you've gotten used to as just, living and existing in this world that aren't really available.
Yeah.
So those are like the little things I miss. And in a way, I think this quarantine has been good for a lot of us because I think most of us, we were, not most of us, but we often heard people say how either I'm not a people person or I don't like people or people suck or people are the worst. We've all said that 1,000 times, right? But now I would like to think after this pandemic is over or after we've at least established some way to live under the umbrella of COVID-19, I think we will have a more of an appreciation of being with each other.
Yes, I hear that.
Yeah.
Couldn't
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Since we all are quarantining, we're turning to watching our favorite shows on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime and whatnot. So I have to ask, what are you binge watching right now? What are the top 5 shows? What do we need to tune in? I know you got the goods, so
Well, one of the first things I polished off was the latest season of Greenleaf. That was one. Okay.
yes, I was gonna
Right.
say I was waiting
Of
for
course
it.
I did. Right. I had gotten halfway through it and it was on my list. Like, I gotta finish it. I gotta finish it. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm I finally get to, figure out everything that happened. So that was dope. And so like a lot of people watch Tiger King.
Yeah,
Um, watch
crazy.
Tiger King. Amazing for all the wrong reasons.
All the wrong reasons.
All the
Guilty.
wrong reasons.
So guilty.
So I decided to do a little retro and a little nostalgia and go back to watch things that were really big hits that I never got in on. So currently I am binging West Wing and Grey's Anatomy.
Okay. All
Yes.
right.
So I'm on seasons. I can tell you exactly as I look at the screen. I'm on season 5, episode 6 of Grey's Anatomy. Grey's Anatomy, you could put in the category of Law and Order. All right.
Yeah,
Because
true.
it's like 20 seasons. I was like, damn, Grey's Anatomy has been on a long time.
Shonda Rhimes putting in that work.
Oh my gosh.
That
So
work.
I remember watching the first 2 seasons when it came out. I kind of lost touch with it, didn't go back. I'd never watched West Wing before. And look, I see Deborah Joe already talking about,
BJ.
I need you to binge Breaking Bad.
You
Breaking
never
Bad is
seen
on.
Breaking Bad?
Never seen Breaking Bad. I know. That is next, okay? Because me and another friend of mine, my girl Kelly, she's never seen Breaking Bad either. Because I feel like when you do these, you need a little bit of a partner, right? So her and I are gonna start binge watching this. I'll probably start the first episode this weekend. I've seen the first 3 episodes of it, but I never stuck to it.
Yeah.
So now I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna commit because if I can finish when the last season of Game of Thrones started, if I can finish all 7 seasons of Game of Thrones in 3 months, I can definitely do Breaking Bad. Because Breaking Bad, I think, is only 5 or 6
Yeah.
seasons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not too bad. So so yeah, like I have a whole TV plan Oh, and of course, I'm watching Black AF, Kenya Barris's new show. I've watched the first 4 episodes.
You can start that.
Yeah, really funny, and so that's been good. I see somebody put in Ozark. Ozark, I have not finished this last season. I love
It's good
Ozark.
though. I love
It's, yeah,
Ozark.
it's so good, so good. I have The only reason I haven't finished it is because my husband said that he was going to jump in and start watching Ozark, so I'm trying to wait for him to catch up. But it might take him forever. We'll see how long this lasts. Because I'm also trying to get him hooked on 24, because I loved 24 when it was out, and I was like, I need you to experience this Jack Bauerness.
Yeah.
I need you to know that David Palmer was our first Black president. And it's, no disrespect to President Obama, but it was actually David Palmer. So
True. Yeah. Yeah. I heard y'all
so,
talking a little bit about that on Unbothered a little bit.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like it's been a lot of TV watching, also some book reading. I'm finishing up Ta-Nehisi Coates' latest book, The Water Dancer, and also which is quite good, and also reading Demi Moore's memoir, Inside Out, at the same time, which is very, very good.
That's interesting.
It's very interesting. She has lived a life. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, she has lived a life. And it's good. Oh, and I should say my boy Michael Arsenault, his book, I Don't Want to Die Poor. That's a combination of, with the exception of Ta-Nehisi, that's a combination of me doing research as well as writing, because I'm also finishing my first book at the same time.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I wanted to take a look at some other memoirs that have been written, just to kind of get a feel for just kind of how people by reading them, you understand how they put theirs together, what their thought process was, how, you think about the totality of your life, how are you able to boil down these incidents and things you've been through and make it something cohesive. So it was really good to read Demi Moore's book in terms of organization, flow. It's a fast read. I really enjoyed it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's now too though.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big snack guy too. What kind of snacks are we enjoying while we are binge watching?
So
me and Chris are. So
I would like to be able to name really healthy things. I would love to be able to do this.
Quarantine rules,
but nobody cares. Look, this quarantine, this quarantine fluffiness gonna happen. I'm just gonna accept it. I'm not resisting anymore. But I've tried to minimize a little bit in the last few weeks. But I have to say, probably my peak quarantine snack was I ate a box of Crunch Berries, not in one sitting, but just over the span of a week. So I don't know if you've ever done this.
We just had Crunch Berries and killed them so fast.
Okay, but I mean just all Crunch Berries. I don't even mean with the Captain Crunch part.
Oh, the oops all berries.
All berries. Dude, whoever invented this cereal, whoever decided that they were going to take the goodness of Crunch Berries and put it in one box, I hate you and I love you at the same time. I mean, it was truly magical what I experienced. So I found myself, I guess, I don't know if it's just the anxiety of the times that you kind of reach for comfort food to some degree. Yeah. I had not eaten a box of Crunch Berries or a box of Captain Crunch, period, in probably 20 plus years. But I was like, oh, no, this is happening. Okay, this is going down. So, and I also hadn't been eating a whole lot of like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I used to love them as a kid. That was probably the second favorite snack. All right. So it was between Crunch Berries, peanut butter and jelly. And I got kind of hooked on, not keto ice cream, but just, I forget the name of it, but it's keto lovers love it, but it's an ice cream, and particularly the birthday cake flavor, which I love birthday cake flavored ice cream. That's just like, again, whoever invented that, you have both my support, admiration, and also my anger for bringing something this good
yes, that
into my life.
Cold Stone flavor, that birthday.
Oh, the Cold Stone, yes. Man, let me tell you. There was one point I was going to Cold Stone. I really felt like Tyrone Biggums. I was like itching. I was like, y'all got that birthday cake? Like, right? And I would mix it with, because I just went full just heathen. I just would mix it with, I think it was the Snickers ice cream, get some toppings, but man, it was too much. It was too much. I was like, you know what? my inner fat girl right now is like really happy, but unless I'm trying to be 700 pounds, I'm gonna need to back off just a little bit. So I haven't been to Cold Stone probably since about maybe about 08, 09. It's been a minute.
Ooh, I
Yeah, it's been.
mean, yeah, sometime soon. As soon as this thing is over with, might have
That's
to.
gonna be one of your first trips, is to go
It,
to
it might have to be. I haven't been there in a minute either, to be honest.
Yeah, it's been a while. But I will, I mean, along the food front, I think a really a really great thing that's come out of it is that I've learned to cook so many more things.
Me too. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So what new have you learned to cook? I'm just curious.
Most recent, I'd say the big one was we did we've done a lot of different cool stir fries, but we did
Ooh.
I just did really good fried chicken, trying new recipes. And
Okay.
the what's the baked chicken? What can I think of the name right now?
Like rotisserie type of.
No, it was why can I think of the name right now? It's the fried chicken and then baked it and then threw the tomato sauce over it.
Oh, getting fancy.
It's so good. No, it was good. Yeah, you can fry chicken. Look at Deborah Joy. Hey, I'm learning now. I don't want my black card revoked. So
That's right. Not. I mean,
chicken
it's
parm.
but that's.
Chicken parm.
Oh, you did chicken parm.
Somebody help me out. I don't know why I couldn't think of that name.
Chicken parm. I got you. Yeah, no, it's that's what this time has been good for, because you got to be creative, right? Because like it's instead of you, maybe I don't know about you, but you get a real picture of how much you eat out and how much you order out. Yeah. And I thought before this that we kind of ate at home like a good amount, but at least once a day, I think I was eating outside the house, be it lunch. Like it was something, it was a lot of times it was lunch, sometimes it'd be dinner or whatever. But now that you have to make 3 meals a day, that grocery bill ain't no joke right now.
Exactly. Yep.
Ain't no joke. I mean, we have gone to the grocery store probably 3 or 4 times. We ain't walked out there yet with less than $300 worth of groceries. Ain't walked out there yet.
Yeah.
So you have to be a little bit more creative with the meals, and just kind of trying new stuff. I actually was not really good at breakfast before this pandemic. I did not know how to really make an omelet. Didn't do scrambled eggs. Yeah, nah, it was like my husband was good at making that stuff. I really didn't fool with breakfast that much. Now, that omelet game, you don't even want to see me right now. You don't want to see me right now. Don't want to see me. Okay.
I like that.
The omelet game is popping. So, in fact, I just did a shrimp one the other day. So I'm just like, I'm like, I just go. When I commit, I commit. All right, I'm going all
good.
In.
We know.
Yes, I'm going all in. So that part has been great. It's like now I feel like I've added more. I used to say regularly, like I have 5 good dishes. Now I probably got a good 10-ish.
Yes.
Probably more than that now, but it's been good to experiment with some things. Yesterday I tried to make a chicken noodle soup. Okay. And chicken noodle soup is surprisingly more complicated than you think.
I was just going to say, it's not as easy as people think.
Not as easy as people think.
Yeah.
I don't have the right noodle texture just yet. When I get that noodle texture, it's on. I got the chicken flavor. I got the flavor down. I need the noodle texture, and then I'll be dope.
Oh, we have faith in you. We have faith in you. Speaking of faith, you are a fellow faithful 49er fan.
I am, yes.
Yes.
That is true, yeah.
Yes. So, I was born and raised in San Francisco, or San Francisco Bay Area, but you are from Detroit. The D.
The 313, yep.
How did you become a 49er fan?
It's a bizarre story. It's not bizarre as much as it is like, huh? But so my mother, when she was 18, she moved out to San Francisco, to the Bay Area. Her and my father moved in there because these 2 crazy kids concocted a plan to leave Detroit behind and to move to San Francisco. She got pregnant while she was out there, but with me. And while she was there, she really fell in love with the 49ers and Joe Montana. He was her favorite player. And of course, she moved back to Detroit at some point. And with that being said, it was sort of like, because I saw her root for him and saw her like the Joe Montana, I started to like him. And it was even more easy to do because the Lions were awful. I mean, they were so bad when I was growing up. It's like, why would I like this team? They're so bad. They're terrible.
Sad.
The other sports teams in Detroit were doing pretty well. The Tigers, they won the World Series in '84. Of course, everybody knows how the Pistons with the Bad Boys in the '80s. And even eventually the Red Wings came around. They were losing for a long time when I first, kind of when I first was born. And then, they drafted Steve Yzerman when he was 19 years old, spent some more losing years. And then they were, probably the team of the 90s, 2000, like mid 90s, well into the 2000s. I mean, I think they went to the playoffs like 26 years in a row. Like it was crazy. So all that stuff, and the Lions, they were always hopelessly either mediocre was probably the best way to describe them.
Yeah.
Mediocre, no, was probably their ceiling rather.
Yeah.
But they were a pretty pathetic franchise. I mean, I think they've only won either one or two playoff games in over 50 years. They've never been to a modern day Super Bowl. So it was just hard not to pour and invest more in the 49ers. So I've been a fan since I was little. And, people act like, the 49ers haven't been through rough patches. As you know, look, I remember Jim Druckenmiller, those years.
Oh
the J.J. Stokeses. I'm like, I remember these times.
Tim Rattay. Oh, my God.
Yes, Tim Rattay. I was like, I remember. Those are some rough years. And even after we didn't have Colin Kaepernick and after Jim Harbaugh left, I know, to say, the last Super Bowl we were in before this year was 2012. I know that's not technically that long, but the whole point is like, as you're going through it, you just feel like you're suffering. So like a lot of 49er fans, I was obviously elated with the season, not real elated to lose the way that we lost. I mean, especially considering it was such a mirror to how Kyle Shanahan lost when he was with the Falcons. Just run the ball. Literally every time we breathe on the ball, we're getting 9 yards of carry, and then to stop running, it was very tough to take. And, I knew that this would be kind of a rough year for Jimmy Garoppolo. He came on better at the end because I think he got more comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's the injury he had. It's as much psychological as it is physical. And physically, he was fine. Psychologically, I could tell from the first few games of the season, he hadn't really, healed mentally where he could trust, himself physically. I still predict really good things for him. I know a lot of people like to, bang on him pretty hard, but I think he's going to be all right. I think he'll be fine. Really glad where we are right now. I'm hopeful. We got a young defense, a young offense, just speed everywhere. So I think we're set up for a couple years. Easy.
I like that. Yeah. So you think we have a shot at going back?
I do. And even though it's usually traditionally or historically in the NFL, Super Bowl, the Super Bowl the runner-ups in the Super Bowl, the losers, they do not usually go back the next year.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's why, I know people often like to give the Bills a lot of crap for losing 4 times, but they don't understand how difficult it was to go those 4. Like, that's pretty hard and pretty unprecedented. So I like our chances to go back. Yeah, I know Tom Brady's in Tampa now, and apparently he'll be with Rob Gronkowski if you believe some of the reports, which is kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, very crazy.
Which I think the most interesting part of this is how will this narrative shape around Bill Belichick, because it's hard not to see this as if he ran off 2 of his best players. Kind of difficult not to look at that. He's still an all-time Hall of Fame coach. I think eventually we may be looking at who knows, the Lombardi Trophy may one day be the Belichick Trophy. Who knows? But I think it's quite a bold and a loud statement that, the best quarterback he's ever had, the best in history, decided to play elsewhere his last season. And, oh, by the way, Rob Gronkowski decides to rise out of the abyss and be like, you know what? Let's run this back, Tom.
The Brady effect.
That says a lot about what they think about Bill Belichick, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's the Brady effect. I actually went to the same high school as Tom Brady, so.
Oh, did you really?
High school, San Mateo. Go Padres.
Oh, nice. Yeah. See, a lot of people out here thought he was coming out to California. That might be the next move, being with the Chargers.
I thought it was L.A., yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot has changed since you've last interviewed with us on Black Solutions. Congratulations on your marriage.
Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
that.
And congratulations on the new podcast. We'll get back to that though. But let's talk about the Atlantic. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about that, how that opportunity came to be.
Well, it was one of those things where the Atlantic, when I was at ESPN, and this was not long after the controversy I had with Donald Trump happened.
Yep.
They had actually sent me an email and asked if I want to write about the experience, to which I said, I love you guys. I read you a lot. Y'all know I can't do that because I was still at ESPN. There was no way they were going to let me write about this for another publication. Really, they didn't want me talking about it at all because, ESPN, their desire was for this story to die down and flat out go away. So they did not want me to do any publicity that was playing or that where I had to speak in detail about that incident because they felt like it just ran it right back through the news cycle. And because after it happened, I didn't make any public comments for it was months. It was like for a minute. And that was more of their decision than mine. It was one I fought against, but it kind of is what it is. And so they come to me then. I told them I couldn't do it. And it just so happens that one of the top editors there was somebody whose class I spoke to when I was a newspaper reporter back in Detroit. I spoke to her sports journalism class. This was, years ago. And she become a really, big editor at The Atlantic, very sharp, very intelligent. Her name is Adrienne LaFrance. She's a wonderful, wonderful person and good to work for. So all the reports in the media and it started to get out in 2018 that I was leaving ESPN. And so, they just kind of waited till the dust settled a little bit with that. And they reached out to me and said, hey, they'd like to have a conversation about me potentially working there and what we could do together. Me, Adrienne, and Jeffrey Goldberg, who is the executive editor of The Atlantic. We all went out to breakfast in DC because I was living in DC at the time. We went there, had a great breakfast. I love both of them right away. I knew from reading The Atlantic, the place where we all got to read Ta-Nehisi Coates, that would be if it was a good fit for him, I know it's going to be a good fit for me. Yes. As that's where he wrote, The Case for Reparations, which is arguably one of the best. I think it's probably the best magazine article I've ever read, but it was outstanding. And you see how his career blossomed from that launching pad. So, we just came together and it was, real easy and quick. And as of October of 2018, I started writing for him, and it wasn't a beat that they had open. I just told them what I wanted to write about, and they said yes, because I told them I specifically wanted to write about the convergence between or the intersections rather between sports, politics, race, and gender.
Yes,
that's what I wanted to focus on, and they thought that was right up their alley because they're not interested in who's going to win the NBA title or if LeBron is greater than Michael Jordan. They're interested in these other issues that have to deal with sports. Right now, for example, I'm on book leave right now, but one of the things I'd probably write about if I were writing for them now is I saw a statistic where college football is responsible for really almost the majority percentage of revenue at most of these major colleges. And the presidents, of course, and the NCAA, which are the college presidents, they would like to get back to the business of college football. The problem is they can't get back to the business of college football because then they would have to admit that college football players are not students, that they're actually employees. Because you can't have them playing football, but your regular student body isn't even allowed on campus. So that would basically make the case that these guys need to be paid, and they're not going to do that. And as a result, you may see a lot of universities suffer financial losses that are staggering. They probably would have anyway, just because of, what we've had to do, with COVID and being under quarantine, but football would not necessarily save them. But understand that now we know football on TV, the conferences will not get that money, the schools will not get that money. The college football playoff, which is worth roughly about $20 million per school, that wouldn't happen either. So they have a lot at stake and a lot they're going to lose. Very tough for me to feel sorry for them in this case, because had they paid their student athletes, I'm not saying that this situation could be avoided, but hopefully after this is over, they will have to understand that they can approach this one or two ways. Either they can get in front of it and understand that this amateurism game they've been trying to play is a total sham, or the market is going to decide for itself, and you're going to see a lot of guys begin to sidestep them and further enhance the underground economy around college football and leave them completely out of the mix. So I hope it does force them to have some reasonable approach to what is obvious to most of us, and that college football players or college athletes need to be played.
Right, because we don't want to see these kids go out like that, for sure.
No.
Yeah. Now, you do have a niche for creating successful podcasts. First with His and Hers, and now with Unbothered.
Yeah. Well, now a third, because now I got the Wire podcast.
Now the Wire one too, which we're gonna talk a little bit about too. That's one of those shows you were talking about earlier where I haven't. I didn't watch it when it first came out, but I just started watching it again.
You just started watching it again? Okay. Because I'm saying that could be your show that you pick up again. It should be The Wire. Exactly.
Yeah. So, but in your opinion, what goes into creating a successful podcast?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do when you start one is you need to have respect for the medium. And by that, I think because people have seen a lot of successful ones, they see a lot of them in the marketplace, period, that people get to thinking it's just easy to start a podcast. Right. And everybody's like, oh, I'll just start a podcast.
I can do it. Yeah.
I can do it, right? Before you start, you need to check out other podcasts. You need to, especially the really successful ones, and be able from that to determine or point out the things that have made them successful. Even though things are looser in a podcast, you do need to have some kind of format, or understand what this podcast is about. Is it about you discussing topics that are important to you? Is this an interview, guest driven podcast? In the case of The Wire, is this a rewatch podcast? What is going to be your thing?
Right.
And so that I think was really helpful. So when we started His and Hers, we had that thinking. That's why I can tell people about, don't go into it thinking it's easy. We were frustrated. Mike and I were very frustrated with the fact that we had told many TV producers at ESPN, anybody who could listen, that we really wanted a show together. We felt like we could do it. So they ignored us, and they kept ignoring us. And despite the fact that when we were on TV, we always got people saying man, you guys are so good together. They just, they didn't really see it in us. And I think a lot of it had to do with what was successful on television then. For one, you didn't have a whole lot of shows where you had the show was driven by, in part or completely by, a woman's opinion. You have seen women, of course, in roles where they're the host, they're the anchor, and they're teeing up other men usually to discuss the sports issue of the day, that particular sports. So they were used to women being a setup prop for a lot of things. That was the role that you saw. And so it was that part of it. It wasn't really on television then. The other part of it was that the working formula was white guy, black guy. Because you had Skip and Stephen A. You had Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon.
Yeah.
That was what the formula was supposed to be. It needed to be an obvious visual difference that communicated to the viewers that y'all thought differently based off how you look.
Yeah.
Mike and I are around the same age. We're both black. He's from New Orleans. I'm from Detroit. It felt too similar, even though we were like-minded but very different. At the time, he's married with 3 kids. At the time, I was single. So to them, they couldn't see the nuance of blackness, frankly. And there's a lot. People treat black people all the time like we're a monolithic group, that we all think the same. And we all know from our family members, our friends, just from our community, that we are a wide valley of opinions, thoughts, ideas, and perspectives. But that's not the way TV executives look at things. It's no different than how actors are often pigeonholed from things based off what the characters that they played.
Yeah.
So we got sick of dealing with that. So we decided we were going to start a podcast. And so we went to the audio department, and the head of the audio department at the time was a Black woman named Serena Johnson, who I still work with to this day for various independent projects. And she made us audition, which we thought was funny. We're like, we got to audition. Like, I'm sorry, do you not know who we are? But we auditioned for sure. And she liked the audition. She said, all right, like, we'll do this. And we weren't great at it at the start. We laugh about our first podcast because it was right after the Baltimore 49ers Super Bowl, when Beyonce shut down Louisiana. Right.
Crazy.
It was right then, and when the lights actually went down.
Yeah.
And we were on this podcast. Yeah, the power went out. We were on the podcast, talking about the game, but we didn't really want to talk about the game. What we really wanted to talk about was Beyonce and the power going out. That's what we wanted to talk about. But we forced this sports conversation in there that we felt obligated to have, because we felt like, well, that's what somebody else would do. It's like they would have this sports conversation. And over the course of the next 4 or 5 podcasts, we just said, you know what, we just gonna do us. And we're not gonna worry about how other people do their podcast or the topics other people talk about. We just decided to do our thing. And our thing was taking a sports topic and turning it into something personal and or relatable that we all could agree with. We did a whole podcast on Jeannie Buss and Phil Jackson's relationship, which was, it was about, working with somebody, that you're in a relationship with, and or, you both are in the same industry, and just like different stuff. Like, we would always find these stories that were, that might appear to be little things or inconsequential slice of life stuff, and we turn it into something. And that became kind of our niche. And so from the podcast started to grow and get really successful. And eventually some other staff changes happened on Numbers Never Lie show Mike was on. And then they decided to put me on the show. And then the then president of ESPN decided to change the name of Numbers Never Lie to His and Hers. So it all started from a podcast. And we kept doing the podcast for a while, but once we got to SportsCenter, we were a little too busy. And so when I once I left ESPN and started Jemele Hill as Unbothered, I wanted to get back to, the intimacy of a podcast. That's the one thing it gives you. It's like you're in a studio, you're with somebody, y'all can sit and kick it just like we're doing now. And it's a totally different conversation than when you're on TV, when you're on the radio, when you're in other mediums. The difference is that I didn't have to pretend like I needed to fit a sports topic in there. Right. I could just talk about whatever I wanted. And with this, I wanted to have really great conversations with people who I thought were interesting. Interesting doesn't mean they have to agree with me or we have to have the same opinions, but just that they're interesting. And particularly, as you know, there's a lot of Black creatives, ones that we have loved for many years, some that are new to us, some that are emerging, that have these incredible stories. So I wanted it to be another platform where Black people could share their stories. And we can have great conversations and talk about how and what they felt about what was happening in the world. So it was really quite basic. And it came from a state of being unbothered, because this is the most unbothered I've been in my career. I often like to say this, and it bears repeating, is that the best part about where I am in my career now is that every job I have is a job that I want and not a job I need. That's the best part, right? Okay.
Amen.
Yes. And so when you get to that part of it, you do feel very unbothered. So I don't feel the need to stick to convention, to conform, to do what everybody else is doing, because I'm in a great space where everything that I'm doing, I'm in partnership with people. I am not working for people.
Yes.
So that part of my career is hopefully over.
Yes. And when I was, while I was listening to Unbothered, I hear that in your voice. And that's what kept drawing me in, is that feeling of being unbothered and relating to all this stuff. And it's amazing. Do you you had so many dope guests, including Deborah Joy.
And
Was that?
Deborah Joy, yeah, that's right. And even her uncle BB1.
Yeah, he's on
Yeah,
there too.
yeah.
Yes, a lot of inspirational stuff. Do you have um, anyone in particular that really stood out? Any very like
What?
crazy memorable moments, or anyone?
Kevin. I mean, it was when we did the season 1 wrap up. That was a lot of fun, like reliving all of that. You know, Cat Williams, that was one that comes to mind, because Cat Williams, when he was on there, he was nothing like I expected. Nothing. I don't know what I expected. I think maybe it's because he's a comedian. There is an expectation. You always think a comedian is going to be on. That's how they come into every room. Yeah. Cat Williams came in the studio. He had a briefcase, and that was it. No entourage, nobody else with him. A lot of people, they'll bring like their PR person, managers, agents, social media crews. It was just him and a briefcase, and that was it. And what he revealed, I mean, he was so honest and so thoughtful. And for him to say that he had 59 million, not a typo, not a mistake, $59 million embezzled from him. I was just like, we got to hear more. But when he broke it down, so the motto that Kevin Hart has been able to use to make an enormous amount of money, most successful comedian of all time, is definitely Kevin Hart. I don't know where they are money wise. I mean, Eddie Murphy, mostly for movies, that would be it. But when it comes to like stand-ups, being his own business, like Kevin Hart has done something truly extraordinary. Cat Williams had been doing that for a while, minus the kind of movie success that Kevin Hart has had. But he owns his own comedy. So a lot of those specials that you've seen of his on Netflix are purely his. And that's where he's been able to generate a lot of his income. So as the more preparation I did for the interview, it was figuring out that Cat Williams had made quite a bit of money. And so for him to have that amount of money embezzled from him because of, some things that went wrong with the people around that he trusted, that was very eye-opening. I guess because everybody's been talking about it the last couple of days because of the battle that was or wasn't, depending on how you see it. But Teddy Riley was one of the most fascinating guests that I've ever had on there. And I still don't know who won between him and Babyface because I couldn't log on to it.
I was hearing Babyface. I know. I heard they was having problems, but I see Babyface all over Twitter that he was winning. So
yes, I think people at that point, they were just tired of Teddy Riley and they wanted him to get. I think his charger ran out, or his iPad lost juice at some point, and he left the room for about a half hour, and Babyface just in there playing by himself. I was like, can y'all please not let Uncle don't need to be in charge of setting up the VCR. That's what that was. Uncle don't need to be in charge of that. Okay.
The VCR.
Uncle just need to sit there with the cigarette that's dangling halfway and talking about how he could have been a member of a doo-wop group.
Exactly.
That's what we need to leave Uncle. Okay. You don't need good Uncle story. Part of this new technology.
Okay? Yep, some good stories. I'll leave them to the stories.
Yes. So Teddy Riley was on the podcast, and one of the more strange is not the word I would use because I want to be sensitive to he shared something that was probably difficult. But Teddy Riley had been having a lot of anxiety attacks, which he had dealt with over the years. And I asked him, how was he able to deal with these attacks? Because mental health has been something that we have thankfully talked about more in the Black community in recent years, as more people that are celebrities and are noteworthy have come through and just, been able to share with people that they suffer from these things too, making people feel more comfortable. When I asked him how he got over it, he said that the way he opened it up was, I know this is going to sound crazy. Now we know Black rule number 14. Somebody Black tell you, I know this gonna sound crazy.
Uh-oh.
You know what's coming next. It's gonna sound. It's gonna make you do that.
Yeah.
We know what it is, right?
Yep.
It's kind of like if you hear somebody black say, "On everything I love, please run," because if
I
you
don't want to
start saying, "Oh," it's going down. It's gonna be real. If they say "on everything I love" or "on my mama,"
oh my.
if you hear one of them two,
Yep.
ain't nothing good coming after that.
Nah.
But black rule number 14 is if it starts with "this gonna sound crazy," usually it will live up to that.
Oh, here
And
we go. Yep.
he said how he got over the anxiety attacks was that he had an imaginary friend. And, you know, I needed to know more.
Yeah.
I needed to know more. And so I asked him what his imaginary friend's name was. And he said his imaginary friend's name was the Magic Man.
I'm glad he was open to talk about that.
I'm glad he was too. That's where we were with it. And so he talked about how this was a calming presence for him, and how, you know, and how the presence reminded him of his mother and that presence. And so, yeah, it was, of all the things that I thought would have come out of Teddy Riley's mouth, him having an imaginary friend named the Magic Man would not have been one of the 5 million I could have thought of. So that was a unique guest, as you might imagine.
Indeed.
Yeah, I know. I had to absorb that. So that was a unique guest. Rick Ross. Rick Ross.
Yes.
Rick Ross and Freddie Gibbs probably had the two most innovative ideas that I've ever heard of, business ideas. Rick Ross discussed how he wanted to invest in horse sperm. Because, you know, you can make of the successful horses, you know, you breed them. Yeah. That's a part of it. But I hate that I forgot. He had a very catchy name that he came up on the top of it. Probably not fit for me to repeat, but it was very catchy though. Right. And Freddie Gibbs, who probably told the best story of any podcast guest on there about his father's rivalry. Freddie Gibbs is from Gary, Indiana, and his father, and that's where Michael Jackson is from. For people who don't know, his father and Michael Jackson are both the same age, and they had a rivalry growing up, where they was the two little singers in the neighborhood, and I guess Michael Jackson destroyed him this particular time, and. And as he put it, his dad ain't been right since. And he, you know, likes to occasionally remind his father that who are you? You can't even beat Michael Jackson. And it's just really very, very funny. So he told a great story. But a business idea he had was opening a crack store, because he feels like eventually all drugs would be illegal. So he wants to get ahead of the curve. We already have cannabis stores. He's like, yo, I'm telling you, we're going to be having a crack store. I'm going to invest. And I was like, Will you invest, Freddie, in a crack store?
That sounds dangerous. I don't know.
He's like, it's gonna be legal. And I'm like, I don't know if that's the next wave. I don't know if we're going there. You know, it took us a while to get to weed. I don't know if we're gonna get to crack in this lifetime. But who am I to dash the dreams of a future Black entrepreneur? Not me.
Make money. Get your money.
Get your money. I was like, oh, crack store, okay. But no, all the guests have been, you know, really fabulous, and always have told stories and insights and I've learned as much from them as possible. You know, me and Michael Eric Dyson, I think we argued on my podcast about 2 hours. So that's my boy right there. I love him, Detroit's finest. And, you know, having like attorney Benjamin Crump, who represented Trayvon Martin's family, and he's done a lot on the front lines of social justice, Botham Jean's family, like so many. He was really tremendous as well, talking about the rights that we all need to be aware that we have, particularly when we get pulled over by the police. So just a short list of folks. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to season 2, which starts in June. We pushed it back a little bit because we're, you know, like everybody, we're kind of adjusting on the fly. Right. It's changed how we do production because we're not in studio, so we had to make some adjustments. But the guest list is, you know, pretty fire, and we're going to be maybe putting out a few bonus episodes before we start again in June.
I like that. Now, speaking of really, really, really dope interviews, back in 2016, you had the opportunity of hosting Genius Talks at the BET Experience, and you had one really special guest, my favorite basketball player of all time,
Of
Kobe
all
Bryant.
time, huh?
Yeah, that's same last name. Grew up watching him. Like
True. Okay.
I had to be a big Laker fan. I had to be Kobe. Now looking back on that, how was that experience for you, and what do you remember most about that interview?
Well, what I remember most, just in general about, knowing Kobe a little bit, I definitely don't want to be one of these people who advances the relationship because he's no longer here, or makes it seem more than what it was. But we started, our relationship started over a disagreement, over a particular critique that I had of him.
I read
It,
the article.
yeah, the article in which he made the comments.
Appreciate that article, by the way. That's amazing.
Oh, the article I wrote for the Atlantic, right?
Yeah.
So so yeah, I mean, I guess the people who don't know, I'll give the brief backstory. Is when I was doing His and Hers with Michael Smith, uh, Kobe had done, the New Yorker had done a profile on Kobe, and he was asked about Trayvon Martin, and he made some comments that I thought were really insensitive. And he talked about how just because he was black, he shouldn't be expected to lead this cause or comment or talk. And then he talked about due process and hearing both sides of the story. And, I was just like, ain't no both sides. You know what the sides are? One child went to the store to get some Skittles ironically, to watch the All-Star game because it was All-Star weekend and it was in Orlando where Trayvon Martin lived. And he went there to do that, and he was murdered by not a cop, not anybody with any authority, not that it would have been right in that case either. He was murdered by somebody who decided that this black boy did not belong in this neighborhood. And it was just as simple as that. And so I didn't like what he had to say. I talked about it on air, and probably before I could finish my last sentence, Kobe had sent me a direct message. Keep in mind, we were not following each other. Okay. I was following him, but he wasn't following me. And so he sent me a direct message and said, I need to talk to you as soon as your show is over. And I'm like, okay. And before I could even get off the show that day, it was two more of his reps who had sent an email, who had said, like, Kobe needs to talk to you right away. And I'm like, oh snap, this is about to be good. I'm like, all right.
Come on,
I'm like,
man.
I'm ready. Shoot,
Yeah.
what you want to do, Kobe? What you want to do? So I called him, and we had a great conversation. Barley, I thought we might talk maybe about 15 minutes. We talked for about an hour. And he really wanted to. A lot of times you enter those conversations, people have their mind already made up. Right. And I thought he's just like going to be on some, how dare you come at me? I'm Kobe Bryant, this and that. It was never like that. He wanted to understand why I said the things that I said. And I explained it to him. And I just thought, I'm not asking you, Kobe, to pick up a picket sign or anything like that. Not saying you have to do that. However, realize that this child has been murdered. And so there is something that, there is a serious miscarriage of justice that has occurred. And I think, he just kind of, his perspective of having been through the court system, I think it was different. I think he was kind of projecting his own experience about due process and, feeling like he was done wrong in the justice system. So I think that's where a lot of that came from. But he understood. And, fast forward, him and Vanessa, they donated some money, I think, to the cause that Trayvon Martin's parents, that they were leading. They spoke at one of the rallies they held. And he became, and I'm in no way giving myself any credit for this, but he became very vocal about issues for people of color, especially later in his career, and certainly up until his death. And the last time I interviewed him and did a one-on-one with him while I was at ESPN, he talked about how he supported Colin Kaepernick and how if he were still playing, he would have taken a knee. So he just came full circle. And so I asked him to do that Genius Talk off that conversation, because he gave me his number, said, you ever need anything, hit me up, call me. We can always have a conversation. And a couple months after that conversation, I hit him up and said, hey, are you interested in doing this Genius Talk? And to my surprise, he said yes right away. And BT was trying to get stuff together to do it. And he hit me up after I had gotten his initial confirmation. And he was like, hey, we doing this or what? I was like, my bag, Mr. Bryant. Yes, we are. We are doing this. And so we had a great sit down, learned a lot about him. and he was just fantastic. And he was talking then about how he wanted to go into storytelling. And I told him, and I should have learned through looking at his career, never doubt Kobe Bryant, because I told him he was going to be very unhappy in retirement. I was like, you don't seem like you're going to retire easy, man. Like, you're going to probably try to come back a couple times. Like, he's like, no, I'm telling you, when I'm done, I'm going to be done. And I'm going to focus on telling stories because that's something I've always wanted to do. And lo and behold, within a couple years after retiring, he won an Oscar because he was doing the other thing that he loved, which was to tell stories.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So Chris is telling me that IG Live might cut off pretty soon. We'll get back on.
Okay.
If it just turns us off, we'll get back on. If that's okay with you, of course.
Yep, that's all good.
Now, you also got an amazing opportunity to narrate a documentary, a LeBron James documentary, More Than an Athlete. So tell us how that opportunity presented itself, and how did narrating More Than an Athlete make you feel about athletes and activism?
Well, it was funny because they originally asked me to be a part of it, not as a narrator, but just as somebody giving their commentator, giving their commentary, rather. And at that point, they didn't have a fully formed picture about the story they were trying to tell. I was just going to go in there and talk about, how Black athletes had evolved. We'd already actually done the interview, and I talked about the evolution of the NBA and Black players' role in that. And it was very general. And then Laura Ingraham from Fox told LeBron to shut up and dribble. And that changed the whole narrative of this documentary, because at first it was supposed to be a story about, basketball and its evolution and the evolution of Black players and all this. After that, she gave LeBron not only the title, but she gave him the story. And so all of it then became about how, Black players, basketball players in particular, have been told in some form or fashion to shut up and dribble for literally the existence of the Black athlete. And so, at that point, they were really trying to tie that theme strongly together. And they asked me if I would be interested in narrating this, of which, I was pleased on a lot of levels, or exhilarated rather, not just pleased. Wanted to be, in partnership for this particular type of content, which is right up my wheelhouse. I thought it was a great thing that LeBron was doing. And also, you don't hear a lot of women narrate sports documentaries. You don't really, especially not a lot of Black women. And I thought it was kind of cool that it would be my voice that people would be hearing. And it was just sort of ironic, because the one thing I thought I've never done well in terms of TV is, we call it tracking, when, you hear us over speaking over, video or whatever. I was like, I've never been good at tracking, but I was like, I'm gonna be good on this. That's all I know. Yeah. And so a lot of studio time, crafting the story, getting everything right. And we did it in a really unique way, because they would just ask me questions about particular incidents that happened, be it, the racism that Bill Russell faced, or, how people responded to Malice in the Palace. I was talking, you had asked me about me narrating More Than an Athlete, the Showtime documentary. And so it came together really, really organically. I think they thought, just given this kind of stuff I write about, the type of stuff I tend to speak about, that I would be a great credible voice to add to it. And for me, it was just really meaningful to be able to narrate this documentary, being a Black woman, and kind of add that as like a really proud first of my own. So it was just a lot of different reasons how that came together. And I was not surprised by the wonderful reception it received, because I knew with the old footage that they had and just tying the story together, that people would be really, really pleased with the final product.
Yes. And yes, please, we were. Would you do it again? Would you narrate another documentary?
I would. A lot of it, of course, depends on what the what the subject matter is and everything like that. But I would absolutely do it. I don't know if this is my forte. I'm not Liv Schreiber. Like, I don't have that voice. Like, he narrated so many things. But it would be something that I think I would do again. And for a second, there was some brief talk of doing like a football version of More Than an Athlete. And so I told him, it's like, if y'all decide to do that, I'm in for sure. Like, don't call nobody else. I just want to do this.
Yes.
That would be dope.
Oh, we would. Oh man, we would love that. We
Right.
would love that little Kaepernick action for
Yeah, I was
sure.
saying that would be essentially a huge chunk of that would be about Colin Kaepernick.
Yes. So you are a huge inspiration for young women everywhere, especially young Black women. Um, what advice do you have for young women out there who are trying to make it in their prospective careers?
Generally, what I say is that, and it's something I had to learn. So anything I say, these are things I was very imperfect at and only learned through experience and time, maturity, age, a lot of things. But worry about the things you can control. Don't get caught up in being consumed with the things that you can't. What you cannot control is what people think about you, how people perceive you. You cannot control what jobs you get and who thinks highly of you and all those other things. What you can always control is how hard you work. You can control being prepared. You can control being on time. You'd be shocked how far just doing the basics well, consistently, and reliably will get you. And I think what happens is that a lot of us, we start psyching ourselves out very early, thinking about all the qualifications we don't have, all the things we can't do, coming from a more negative mindset instead of, really boiling it down and really focusing on how we can be, more driven, more prepared and those kind of things. Those are things you can control. Like, I'm not the best writer in the world at all. I mean, I can hold my own, but I'm just not going to let too many people outwork me. And that's something you can always control is your work ethic, and your output for sure. And that's not to say that you don't need mentors, allies, and sponsors, because you need all three, in there, and understand the difference between the three things for sure. But that is to say that when you focus on your focus,
Yeah.
there's so much good that comes from that. Like, I was never the kind of person, I have at some points in my career, but I realized just how pointless and ridiculous it was, where, you started clocking everybody else's achievements, like, ooh, how'd they get that job? Or why did they have this? Or why did they have that? When I started worrying about stuff like that, it not only made me lighter and made my life so much easier, it allowed me to focus more on my own thing. I've always seen everything I got, and for that matter, the things that I didn't get, as being things that were supposed to happen.
Yeah.
I've never felt, I mean, I've been disappointed to not get things, but what's always happened most of the time is that there was a reason that I didn't get it. We tend to think of a closed door being a missed opportunity. I tend to think of a closed door being an opportunity to do something amazing, because there was a reason that did not happen. Maybe you weren't ready for it. Maybe it wasn't the right situation, or maybe that was something that wasn't your calling and you just didn't know it. Because I thought Charlemagne, in his first book, he talked about this black privilege, and I thought it was
Yeah.
it was an amazing chapter. That he has a whole thing about F your dream, right? And he doesn't say F, right? And because people have a tendency to see you being successful, see what you're doing, and they appreciate that success, but they think
Right.
that that's their dream. But they only think that's their dream because they're looking at your success, not because they have a passion for acting or a passion for storytelling. They're just like, oh, you successful. I want to do what you do. We don't really want to do what I do. You just want the
Yep.
success that comes with what I do.
Yep.
And understand that you can find your own lane for that. And what you can wind up doing is wasting a whole lot of time and a whole lot of energy in something that's truly not your gift or your passion. It's somebody else's. And
Right.
so I always encourage people to, be very careful with that. Select mentors very strategically. Understand the difference between a mentor and a sponsor and an ally. All right. Those are three different things.
Yes.
Yes, they are. Like mentors are sounding boards. Mentors are somebody you can go to when you have, problems and you need, feedback, not necessarily always on your work, but, you may need personal feedback. Like that's a more personal, organic connection. So when you run up to people and say, hey, I need a mentor, you don't know anything about them. You like their success. That doesn't mean they're going to make a great mentor. Because I'm very honest with people. It's like my time is very limited. I have very little time to have a whole lot of mentors. I have a select few because if I'm going to commit to being your mentor, I want to be able to be in a position where I can be there for you and you can call me and I can stop down and say, hey, let's figure this out. That's one level of a relationship. If you want somebody to be an ally, that means somebody that you want to put you in position to get an internship or to get something out of it. And if you need me to be that, I just need you to say that at the beginning. Say, look, can you put in this word for me for this job? Can you, look over my resume? Can you be a reference for me? Just say it. Because a lot of times people ain't got time for all the rest of that. Just say what it is you want. All right. We
Closed mouth
appreciate
don't get fed. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I appreciate that because you ain't wasted my time. Don't come at me like, oh yeah, I want you to be my mentor when really you just looking for a hookup. I don't mind you looking for a hookup. Just say that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right. And so then, the other thing is a sponsor. I mean, a sponsor is the same thing. That's about them getting you a specific job. Hey, I need you to put this word in for me to do X. Okay, let's do that.
Right.
And allies can be people at work, people who especially should be at work, people who are, when they are in those rooms and your name is brought up, they say, you know what? I think William would be great for that job. I think he'd be good for that. That's an ally, somebody who will speak your name in those circles that you need to speak them in. And, we just have to be smart about understanding the difference. And so I would say to young women, have those relationships, lined up. It's like, have your mentors, have your sponsors, and have your allies, and make sure that you don't intermix what the three are, and be very direct and blunt with what it is that you want so that you don't waste people's time.
Yes. Dropping the gems.
I'm trying.
Hope everyone is hearing this.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And last but not least, because I don't want to hold you. I know you're busy. Who are your three most inspirational athletes?
Ooh, inspirational athletes. Okay.
And if you could pick one from past or present, dead or alive, to have dinner with,
Ooh,
have a conversation with.
ooh. Look at you putting me on the spot. Now, I put inspiration in a different bucket than I do, say, athletes that I love to watch. Like my favorite athlete to watch growing up was Isaiah Thomas because, being from Detroit, so that made a lot of sense. Yep. And, he inspired me in the sense that like he was putting on for Detroit and getting people to see this was not just a city where murders happen. So that's like, that's a little bit different. But in terms of inspiration, if I had to pick the one athlete that I'd love to sit down and have dinner with and pick their brain of the moment, it'd probably be Serena Williams. It's hard not to pick her because she's been so excellent for so long. And we talk, about great American sports stories. I mean, her and her sister is just a tremendous sports story. And so I think, with what she's been through, all she's achieved. I mean, she has carried a sport. Her and her sister basically took turns. They handed it off to one another. And for Serena she defied all of the barriers that people thought about how long a female tennis player could be excellent. Like usually when you got to like your mid-30s, that's supposed to like it, right? And it'll be interesting to see how this quarantine and this additional layoff will benefit somebody in her position because I think she's just one away from Margaret Court's record from tying for most most Grand Slam titles. So it'll be very, I like to think that she's going to break that record and hopefully break it by a while. But, just with her life and everything she's gone through, I would just love to kind of pick her brain about excellence and achievement and ambition and how she was able to stay strong despite the fact that she had completely infiltrated and dominated this sport Yeah,
Dominant.
dominated. I mean, you could easily make the case that along with Tiger Woods, along with LeBron, along with many other great athletes, Tom Brady, that she was um, more dominant than they were, or at worst, just as dominant. Um, so yeah, I mean, she would probably be that person. And just like in general, I mean, it's hard not to be inspired by. I mean, Colin Kaepernick would probably fit that bill. I know Colin, so I mean, he would be very high on that list. You know, despite all the what this has cost him, and I knew after the president said his name at a rally, I believe it was in Alabama, I knew he would never play again in the NFL. And you know, eventually I think there will be streets and schools named after him. And so I hope that while something very precious was taken away from him, um, you know, I think people need to understand that, uh, you know, when you have desired to be a professional athlete for as long as he had and put in that much work, um, for him to still continue to hold on to that, I don't blame him for that at all. But I hope he's able to see that the story that history will write for you will be so much greater than what you have could have ever accomplished as a player, even had he won that Super Bowl in 2012.
Yeah.
I would say that. So you know, he would be on that list of, I think, the most inspirational athletes. You know, it's just, man, it's like it's so many of them for so many
Yeah.
different reasons, but those are kind of the two that come to mind. I mean, it's funny because I've been covering sports for over 20 years, and I've seen and covered some of the best. And um, whether you like it or not, being around them enough, something that they do rubs off on you. Like with LeBron in general, just, you know, being in his presence, is that the way that he has empowered this generation of athletes is just unbelievable. I hope people understood. Did you watch the Jordan documentary, the first two episodes?
Oh yes.
Of course,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Now,
Yes.
what was very clear is when you think about what the mindset of Michael Jordan was when discussing with you know, when he was talking about Scottie Pippen and his contract issues,
That
right?
contract. Oh.
Man, that contract was so bad. But Scottie is, what happened with him is not surprising. Back from the South, he had been in the NBA for a little bit, not long, but you stick $18 million from him and tell him it's 7 years, you
His
know,
eyes will light up.
that's
Yeah.
right. I mean, that's like he's feeling like he hit the jackpot. I mean, like that is money that will set him the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm.
But I think about the mindset of players now, and it has changed so drastically. The money has gotten a lot better. That's a big
Yep.
part of it. But I think another part of it is that you have a guy like LeBron James who has consistently over his career taken shorter deals just so that he can always have leverage on teams, so that they always have to build around him, so that they always have to come to the negotiation table. How he's created uninterrupted so he can own his own media content. He has taken player empowerment to another level. You
Yep.
know, as much as he got clowned for it at the time of going to Miami, think about how that changed the NBA forever. Guys no
Mm-hmm.
longer felt like that they had to stick with a team for the rest of their careers. Watch, in many cases, their primes wasted by
Yeah.
GMs who couldn't manage a paper bag, and they felt more empowered to create their own destiny. They can be their
Yeah.
own GMs, right? If
Yeah.
not for LeBron, Kevin Durant doesn't happen, you know, and
Yep.
it's like,
Oh yeah.
right. And so now that you see players, I noticed that so many players now are starting their own production companies. So many players now getting involved in media. They're tired of relying on traditional and mainstream media to tell their stories. They want to
Yeah.
tell their own stories. And that's something that that's a blueprint LeBron gave him. And Michael Jordan gave athletes of his generation a different blueprint. He showed that Black athletes can be the face of billion-dollar companies, that they can sell Gatorade, they can sell Hanes, they can sell Nikes. He brought global economy to the NBA.
Yep.
And with the success of the Dream Team and everything, that was a different blueprint. But Michael Jordan people have to remember, until he took those last couple 1-year deals with the Bulls, he was very much in the same situation Scottie Pippen was, that he
Sure
was
was.
he was underpaid for a player of his value.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, I mean, tremendously overpaid. And the
Really.
organization, had, in many ways, they had the best of him, and for a price that they would have paid 40 times as much to get. And so that has changed so significantly. And so what jumped out to me about that is just how players' attitudes are a lot different now. They're a lot more selfish about how they want to create generational wealth for
Yep.
themselves and not for everybody else around them.
It kind of reminds me of Richard Sherman's contract too. Bet on yourself.
Bet on yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And hopefully in the NFL, we will in our lifetime see them actually getting fully guaranteed contracts. Hopefully we'll see that.
Long overdue.
It's long
Yeah. Lord
overdue,
forbid.
but I don't know. I mean, they've already, they've got this new CBA pretty much wrapped up, but like it is, that's a sport that they really need to get a LeBron-like figure who's not a quarterback, that is
Yeah.
able to lead other guys into empowering themselves. Because right now the system is working actively against them. It's still an owner-driven league, and that needs to change for the benefit and the health of the players.
Right. What do you think about the new CBA? Actually?
I think all the concerns that were brought up were legitimate and fair. I know there was, I'd have to go back to check to see what happened to it, but like a big part of it is the fact that not providing lifetime health benefits. I mean, that was and what was being done or not going to be done now with some of the aging and older players that had already played. And so while there was some concessions, some good things that they were able to get out of it, until they're able to stand together to get fully guaranteed contracts, I think for the most part, those CBAs are going to always be very heavily favored for the owners, very much so. Yeah. And it's tough because, with the way football works, it treats everybody as if they're disposable. You got 50 guys on the team, and they know, the owners know this. Those guys have worked so hard and so long to get to that point that the minute one goes down, is 12 more waiting to replace him. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, that mentality is going to be hard to change, because the nature of football is for it to very much be a team sport. The nature of football convinces you to sacrifice sometimes even your
Yep.
own health, all the time,
Yep.
even your own health, to sacrifice all of that for the sake of the organization and the team. And it gets drilled into their heads from Pop Warner up. And that mentality is not easy to change.
Yeah.
It's like it's very much like a military, kind of mindset. But it's a lot more understandable in the military, because you're talking about defending the country as opposed to defending Jerry Jones' right to make billions of dollars. So it's a little bit different. So until they're able to kind of reshape their mindset and frankly understand what they're really worth, I think unfortunately that this will continue to be very heavily favored in the owners in the owners' favor rather.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Mm.
I couldn't agree more. All right. Well, I won't hold you any
All
longer.
right.
I want to thank you.
Oh,
Another amazing Black inspirational
this
spotlight.
was
I
a
want to thank you
pleasure.
from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all the work that you do for our community. And thank you for using your voice for just so much good and amazingness.
Well, I appreciate it. I don't know. I don't know if there'll be NFL this season or not, but if there is, Niners.
Go Niners, baby.
We got this. Oh,
let's go.
That's what I'm talking about. You're lucky my Dwight Clark helmet is in the other room. Otherwise, I break it out.
Wow.
Yeah, I got a signed one, man. Like with the play drawn up on it.
That's big.
Yeah, so it's all good. But yes, thank you. This was a pleasure. And thank you to everybody who came through with questions or just a comment or just engage with each other. Really appreciate it. And you stay healthy, stay safe. Can't wait for that next season of Greenleaf. I've already properly chastised Deborah Joy Winans for her behavior in this last season because she was off the hook. She was crazy. That's why that meme showing her and it says, "This is 2020." I was like, you would be 2020, Deborah Joy. You would be 2020. You are the perfect embodiment of 2020. So
exactly.
Yes. Anyway, but thank you so much and take care. All right.
Thank you. You too. Be safe.
All right.
All right.